What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with David Icke, who is a former professional soccer player, journalist and network anchorman with the BBC. He was the spokesman in the 1980s for the British Green Party, and since 1990 a full-time investigator into who and what is really controlling the world. He is the author of 15 books, including Alice in Wonderland and the World Trade Center Disaster, and his latest book, Phantom Self and How to Find the Real One. David Icke's information is presented in a way that everyone can understand and is a life-changing exposure of both the illusion we believe to be real and the way this illusion is generated and manipulated to imprison us in a false reality. David joins us today to discuss his latest book and his new world tour. David Icke, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin.
First of all, thank you for... We've had a few technical problems just before the start of this interview, so this isn't the normal system you do your interview off, but you've managed to get it working, and I so appreciate you just doing that for us to allow the video to come through. Thank you.
Okay, well, we've not had technical problems. I've had technical problems. Your end's fine. I've been through three computers to actually, get me mug on the screen. So, I'm relieved we've managed to do it.
Yeah, no, well, it just goes to show you've got all sorts of skills. You have absolutely. You've managed to fix it, which is great. So thank you for that. Thank you. Okay, this is going to be a fascinating interview. When I last had you on, it was for The Perception Deception, which I thought was a great book. never in my wildest dreams did I know that you were working on another book, The Phantom Self. Did you expect to do this book?
Well, I'll tell you the way it works, Kevin, and it's worked since I had my conscious awakening in 1990. And that is that I'll get up one morning and I'll just get the feeling to do something. It might be to do a world tour, it might be to write a book, and I just know that the book's ready. And the day before, I may have thought, well, maybe it won't be too long, but then it's just there. And I followed that intuitive, that guidance, that intuitive knowing for the last, 26 years. This month I had my Betty Shine experience. No, 25 years ago, rather. 26 years ago I had a Betty Shine experience. 25 years ago I was on the Wogan show. There's a few anniversaries coming up. And ever since that time, I've followed my intuition. So I just got this feeling about Phantom Self. I got the title in my mind first, Phantom Self, and the concept of what Phantom Self was, and sat down and away it went. I wrote it in a few months, and I'm absolutely delighted with it because it goes forward. It takes things forward and looks at why people are as they are. Because so often you get, you say this is happening, you'll say that's happening, but why don't we know about it? Why don't we know about it before? Why have we heard about this? And when you kind of go through the program from cradle to grave, the perception program that people are downloading all the time, then people can start to see, hey, I can see why I always thought the way I have, and the way I've dismissed things before because they sounded crazy. It was because of the perception download that has been systematically downloaded into people all the way through their lives, and there's a lot of solutions in it because the foundation of the conspiracy, Kevin, for me, obviously there are endless aspects to it, endless faces to it, endless masks to it, but the foundation of it all is disconnecting what I call the phantom self. That's the self-identification with your name, your race, your color, your religion, your income bracket, your politics, size of your house, etc. And self-identifying that with being you when it is what you are experiencing. And basically, phantom self perceives the world almost entirely through the five senses. And the idea of the conspiracy, and without which it couldn't happen, is to disconnect phantom self from infinite self. Because the real self is not the body, it's not any form whatsoever. It is awareness. It is simply the state of being aware. And our point of awareness is one point of perception within infinite awareness to which we are all a part. And you can have pea-size awareness, which is what the system wants humanity to have, or you can open your mind and open your consciousness to access greater swathes of infinite awareness. In other words, your point of attention expands, and suddenly it's encompassing information, insight, knowledge, intuitive knowing that five sense attention does not access. And the whole foundation, and you can go back through what we call time, centuries, thousands of years, and the same thing is there when it comes to human control. Disconnect five sense self or sense of self from infinite self. And when you analyze what I call the program that people go through from cradle to grave, whether it's education, whether it's parents who have downloaded the program and thus become agents of the program unknowingly, whether it's peer pressure, people around you who've downloaded the program and become agents of the program without realizing. And whatever the source of information is, it's telling you to perceive a certain minute range of possible reality and think that's all there is to know, that's all there is to think. And also what happens is that once you've downloaded, I'm talking generally here, of course there are major exceptions and getting larger all the time, but once the download has happened, the downloader becomes the, if you like, mixing my metaphors, the prison warder for everybody else. So you take the download and you take the download to be your sense of reality, the sense of you. But then if anyone else comes along and starts challenging your download and saying, actually, that doesn't make sense, and actually here's another fix on reality, here's another fix on the world, well, those people are mad, crazy, and to be dismissed by reflex action. This is how the program works. And this is why the vast majority still, though it's changing, have a perception of a reality which is not the way the world is. It's simply the way the world is according to the download. And it's very powerful, and it's very detailed, and it's very systematic, and it's been going on a long time.
Yes, and you talk about in your book as well how the bloodlines, are part of this control system in a sense that we're born into, and okay, we did get it, in the perception deception, we did get into the possibility of what was behind the control as well, in a sense, as well, which we'll probably get into this as well. God, this is yeah. Okay, so you've gone straight into it, basically, of what this is. Now, you let's just say this as well. You do have a world tour associated with this new book as well.
Yeah, actually, the two are not connected. I mean, anyone looking on would think they were connected, but I started writing the book before I really had any idea how big this world tour was going to be. And as I've been writing the book, which is, what I started with, just dates and dates and dates and dates have been added and continue to be added. And it's like, again, this synchronicity of my life since that Betty Shine period and what followed is showing itself again, because, you'll know this, many of the people watching this will have had this experience, that once you start to expand your awareness out of the five senses alone, then you find incredible synchronicity starts to happen in your life. Things start to fall into place. And I live my life on the basis of, if it's easy, go for it. If there's blocks all over the place, well, there's something wrong. It might be something wrong with you. It might be the fact that you're pursuing something that is not right at this time, or maybe not right at all. So wait until it falls into place. And my goodness me, how it's fallen into place in the last 6 months. It's just incredible, and goes on being so.
Yes, absolutely, and as well, when you go down that path of looking at things from a different perspective, you do lose people as well. There is a loss as well, in the sense of people that, even family, I could say, that maybe would see you from a different perspective and not be too sure, or not be able to go down the same road as you.
Yeah, well, that's a very relevant point, Kev, to what we've just been talking about. Because we have all this thing about, blood's thicker than water, and all these phrases and terms that we have. But actually, the difference is not really, if you look at it more deeply, the difference between family and not family, or friends and not friends, or others and not others. It's the program and the deprogram. The deprogrammed and deprogramming, more to the point, because it doesn't happen at once, it's a process. But once you start deprogramming, you are literally accessing levels of perception that those still in the program are not. Thus, that which is still in the program cannot understand you. To you, or to them rather, you are strange. You are acting strangely because you are acting outside of their norm. Now, this is a very, very important area with regard to the program, and that's the perception of normal. Normal is simply what people normally experience. It's merely what they normally come across, how people normally interact with them. It doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't mean it's right. It just means it's familiar by being repeated till it becomes a normal. So I've made this point in Phantom Self. If you are born into a madhouse and that's all you know, then madness becomes your normal. And even though, it may be crazy, it's normal. So it's not crazy to you because people don't equate. This is a very important point. People overwhelmingly do not equate normal with insanity. You do when you start to awaken because you can see it. But they don't normally do that. They associate normal with sanity and with rational thinking. And it's funny, when you go through the definitions of rational and insane and all these things, a word keeps coming up. And it's, in terms of the definition of rational, for instance, and it's normal. It's this idea that normal must somehow be how things are. And so when someone comes into the madhouse that you've been living in all your life and you're taking it as your normal, therefore it's sane and this is how things are, and they start pointing out that the madhouse is crazy, then you think they're crazy because your normal is your reference point for sanity. And so people, if you look at it, Kevin, throughout the whenever anyone has questioned the norm, they've been seen as mad or bad. They've been seen as crazy or dangerous. And of course, what history has recorded and perceived from hindsight with large numbers of these crazies is they were right. And the reason is that this program has obviously changes. The nature of it doesn't. What it does in terms of focusing attention on the five senses and forming this fake self, phantom self, that doesn't change. But obviously the detail does. So, years ago, it was fierce religion that created the phantom self. Today, it's technology, it's celebrity, it's game shows and reality TV and all this stuff together that forms the phantom self. But the common theme throughout the ages, whatever form phantom self may take, is that phantom self is disconnected from an awareness and a powerful influence from the greater self. And it's still going on today. Like I say, it's just taking a different expression today. But the whole foundation and structure of control has never changed, really. I mean, in the days when fierce religion was the great controlling force, still is for many people, of course, but I mean, massively then the normal came out of religious books. And if you challenged the normal of the religious books, you ended up burnt at the stake or whatever. It's not, and now, it's slightly more enlightened times. It's certainly in certain parts of the world, the burning of the stake now becomes mass ridicule, mass condemnation, and endless abuse on social media. But the basic process is the same.
Yeah, well, still in some countries the death penalty is pretty disgusting, especially in the
Right.
Arab nations.
It's still there for some, yeah.
No, no, absolutely. I mean, now what I like about this book is that, well, let me just say this: you've never done the conspiracy without the spiritual side being attached to it. I will say that that's true, but this book is different. This book to me is a lot more spiritual. Now, when I look at the past interviews with yourself, like if a past interview I've done on perception deception, there's a lot of comments, but nothing commenting about the spiritual side that we touched on. That's one thing I saw on the thread. It's nothing about that side, and I think that side is the key to the understanding of this all, right? And I'm so glad you've this new book really goes into that side of it as well. Okay, there's a number of ways we could take this right now, but let's just stick with the spiritual side in a sense. Now, you were saying before there that the phantom self. Let's just make sure we're clear on what that is. That's the small you. You know, I have a car. You know, I have a small dog. I live in a small apartment. This is my name. Blah blah blah. That's a small you. Where the expansive you, the awareness or the beyond the five senses is the oversoul, the higher self, the God side of us in a sense. That's the two sides. Could you use those words?
Well, for me, I use the term awareness. It's the state of being aware. The question is how aware. When you are the totality of infinite awareness in awareness of itself, that's the level that people give labels to, like God and other names. But every expression of awareness is an expression of that infinite awareness. It's not necessarily, and mostly isn't, that infinite awareness in awareness of itself, the totality, but it is a point of attention within infinite awareness. And that these points of attention can take form as with the world that we live in. And if this incarnate, if you like, awareness holds that connection to the greater self, then you're in this world, but you're not of it. You're in this world because through the so-called physical body, it's not really, you are interacting with this reality, this tiny range of frequencies called visible light. But your perception of what you are experiencing is not confined only to that point of attention within the world you're experiencing. You also have a connection to levels of perception, consciousness, awareness beyond the world that you are experiencing directly, and thus you have a much greater perspective on what you are experiencing. Once you disconnect that focus of attention that directly operates through what I call the biological computer, the body. I heard a scientist call it a biological computer a few weeks ago. Crikey, it fell off my chair. When you disconnect and focus that only in the five senses, then that now has to get an understanding of what it's experiencing, where it is, what's going on from within the tiny realm that it's experiencing. So where does it look to get a fix on who it is, where it is, what the hell is happening? It looks symbolically out there. And what comes back? Education, parents who have been through the system and downloaded it and become agents of it. Peer pressure, who've downloaded the program and become agents of it. Media, scientists, doctors, all of which have been through the program and become agents of it. And thus, you can see how you get trapped in a bubble. You get trapped in a closed energetic world within which you are trying to get a fix on that world. You can't get a fix on it because you have no external point of reference from which to observe where you actually are, what you're actually in. I've used this analogy that if you stand really close to a wall and you're staring at the wall, all you see in front of you is a blurred reddish color. And okay, you're in that state, fine. Tell me where you are. Well, I don't know. It's kind of reddy and kind of a bit out of focus, mate. Okay, walk back. Oh yeah, well there's some bricks now. Walk back. Oh, it's a house. Oh, walk back. Oh, it's a street. Walk back. It's a town. It's a city. It's a country. Walk back. It's a world. Walk back. It's a construct. It's a construct. We're living in a construct. But if you don't make that symbolic expansion of awareness to levels of yourself, not some bloke in a spaceship, levels of yourself, outside of the bubble, outside of the program, outside of the construct, you can't see what you're in. So you try to make sense of it within it, and all you can do is, in effect, is get your information from those who are telling you where you are when you're not really where they're telling you where you are. And so you become self-identifying with what they tell you you are, which is some person who either the whole 70 years and 10 years, if you're lucky, you are either at the end of it going to just become nothingness and just cease to exist, or you're going to be judged by some god and all these other nonsenses that you get within the program relating to death, why we're here, what's it all about. And you're trying to get a grip of that. I'll give you an example of what I mean by how powerful this program is. I was in the old city of Jerusalem in 1993 for about 3 or 4 days. And I had some amazing experiences there, actually, without moving, just lying on a bed in the middle of the old city of Jerusalem. Anyway, it's another story. One day, I'm near the mosque, the big mosque in Jerusalem. And the old city of Jerusalem is very small. It's not like the great, sprawl of the greater Jerusalem. And it's within, obviously, the walls and what have you. And I was standing next to this mosque, and I was watching some Muslim kids playing football. They were just having a game, and they must have been, 6, 7, 8, something like that. And it just occurred to me watching them, because the old city of Jerusalem, even though it's very small, is broken up into quarters. There's a Muslim quarter, a Jewish quarter, a Christian quarter, and an Armenian quarter. And it just occurred to me, watching those kids kick the ball about, that by that age, 6, 7, 8, they would already have a certain perception of the world, of themselves, of life, of what they call God, and Jewish people. But if they'd have been born literally just down the street in the Jewish quarter or the Christian quarter, for instance, they at the same age would have a very different view of themselves, the world, what they call God, and Muslim people or whatever. And the only difference is the information download, in effect, that they have experienced from in the first 6, 7, 8 years of their lives. And when you see that it can be done in such a small area, and the difference in the way the perception of self, phantom self in different forms, how powerful it can be when you're so close to each other, it's just a wonderful example of how powerful this program is. So once you're in the program and your focus of attention, this is the point, your focus of attention is not outward but inward, then the greater self starts being very silent, because the more you focus your attention on this narrow band of frequency, the more your frequency starts to slow down. It starts to get denser. And high frequency, and in the end no frequency, infinite awareness, therefore simply loses frequency contact. And as you then reverse that with what we call the awakening, and you open your mind from the program by expanding your sense of the possible, which is what you're doing, out of the program, which wants to give you a myopic sense of the possible. By expanding your sense of the possible, you're expanding and quickening your frequency. Therefore, you start to reconnect with higher frequencies where greater awareness, knowledge, intuitive knowing is available to anyone. You know, these great people of what we call the past, like Leonardo da Vinci and Giordano Bruno, who, when you look at their lives, were massively more expanded in their knowledge in various ways, in terms of Bruno, spiritually as well. People say about those people, because they were so advanced in many ways compared with the world they lived in, they say that they were before their time, but they weren't. They were beyond time. Time, there is no time, there's only clocks, and time is part of this construct to which we are welded, this control system. So what they were doing in their era was expanding their awareness to those levels of awareness where this knowledge that they then expressed in this world, hence people said, oh, they were ahead of their time, where it came from. You know, whether you're knocking rocks together in this timeline, or whether you're on the smartphone, or whether you're flying to Mars, it's the same situation. That level of awareness where all that knowledge, insight is waiting to be tapped into is always there, no matter what you're doing, rocks or smartphones or whatever. And it's there. And the idea of the program is to hold you from getting there, because without that, the program can't exist and can't survive.
Right, what I was going to say to you, well, you know, you've kind of answered in a sense, you know, what does a life look like with one that goes beyond the five senses to one that keeps living within the five senses? Because, you know, for those who look up to people within the five senses, you know, the celebrities or the bigger celebrities on YouTube nowadays as well, they seem to be living quite happy lives, doing quite, in a sense, spiritual things in a sense, you know, they're looking after those around them and everything else, you know, they're giving out, they're trying to be, you know, good, you know, they're you know, but what is that difference? What is that major difference between that someone that has an awakening experience to someone that never does in this lifetime? Or can it be judged?
Well, no, you it's not something to be judged, because everything just is. It's to be pointed out that the sense of reality that most people have because of the program is a fraction of what it's possible to understand, what it's possible to tap into to give you far greater creative power. I mean, you know, here we are, Kevin, infinite awareness, having an experience, and you see people going through their lives, living at almost infinitesimal fraction of their infinite potential, because they've been persuaded they're little me, and they have no power. And it's not done, you know, as a joke. It's done because there is a force at work that wishes to entrap humanity, incarnate awareness, in a fake reality, in a fake sense of self, to turn it into basically a slave race to that force, and to turn it into a energy source for that force. Because the force I'm talking about feeds off low vibrational human emotional energy, all based around the foundation state of fear. And as I point out in Phantom Self, I suggest that this force that is ultimately behind human control is not something that even takes form, though it can, just as our awareness can take form, it can take form. But its base state is what we call fear. It was when this you can not just symbolize it. You can be very close to the truth, I think, when you consider it in the form of something like a computer virus. Which what does a computer virus do? It takes over something that already exists, and it distorts it, and it feeds off it. A computer virus gets its power from the computer. It's not created the computer. It's not created the reality, but it is piggybacking it. And the more the virus gets hold, the more it takes over the way the computer operates. And I would suggest this is happening not just collectively within this quantum computer universe that I suggest it is. It's also happening within the biological computer systems that we call the body. And I think there's a very good chance that all these themes we hear from various sources from the past that talk about being born with original sin or being born with something that's not good, relates to this virus, which is running through the body. And when it gets total control of the person's perception, we have a name for that. We call them psychopaths, who have no empathy. They have no compassion, and appropriately, these are the character traits of the people that we call the elite bloodlines.
So, if we go beyond five senses and look into the infinite awareness that lies within and take our power back in a sense, then the world could become a much happier, lovable place in a sense, and we could actually find that we've got self-love for ourselves, we've got self-love for each other, and that there is a oneness between us all. What we do to another, we wouldn't want done to ourselves in a sense, and the world would become a lot more, it would become the utopia that we've always looked for. I suppose this is where it may head towards with your work, if we were to look into this direction. But do you think that potentially the phantom self is only in that state because when we incarnate here as a soul, we are erased about our true awareness of who we are, and we're here to remember it through a different way forward, so that we're not supposed to know what our true potential is. We're supposed to relearn it, to relearn what love is, to relearn what oneness is, because that we've chosen to come here in a sense with a blank canvas to have an earthly experience. How does that fit into your work?
Well, I've heard this many times over the years, and the more that I study this, and the more that I observe, and the more that I, conclude, I don't buy that. You mentioned there about how we could get to some kind of utopian world. I think we were already there. I think that this reality, if you want to talk in terms of time, going way back, beyond known human history, though the ancients talked about it in terms of a golden age. And I think it was a time when the human experience could be likened to the Avatar movie in many ways, where you had a situation where humans were, although in form, in a very much less dense state, a much higher frequency state, therefore less dense, less, quote, solid. And the energetic environment was so much more powerful that people got their sustenance, and the animal kingdom and everything got their sustenance from that field. And thus there was no eating of solid food, if you like. And thus without that, if you take that out of it, then the law of the wild, people say, how can a loving God create a world that where there's so much violence and everything lives because something else dies? And you see endless, constant nature films with one animal ripping another animal apart and all that stuff. Where did that come from? Well, my suggestion is when this hijack took place, when this self-aware inverted, distorted computer-like virus started to get a grip of this reality, one of the consequences was we went further and further into density because the frequency fell, and the ability, because of that density and the energy environment in general, we were no longer able to feed and be sustained energetically and nourished from the energetic field. There was a gap to be filled, and it's been filled by eating energy in the form of what we call food. And once you create a situation where one survives because one doesn't, you create this every person for himself, every lion for itself, every animal for itself structure.
What if that's a free will aspect, though, of having free will to come down here? What if there's no... Forget the word God. Put that to one side right now, right? But what if the nature of the reality is that you have free will to create? So if your animals want to kill other animals to have an experience of that particular type of consciousnness, it's allowed. If we want to come here and innately be harmful, it's allowed. It's allowed. It's your free will. You are in charge of the movie. It's how you perceive and how you want it to play it out. Even to the sense, maybe, that maybe this is your movie.
The point is not what's allowed and what's not allowed. It's what we would like to experience. I mean, if people want to experience the way this world is currently going and where it is designed to go, well, they should experience it and take the consequences of that. What I'm doing is saying, hey, the way this world is going, there are consequences, and there is a force behind it that wants to bring about those consequences. So, I can't change anything in and of myself. I can communicate information that can get people to maybe see, hey, the world's not like I thought it was. It is going in a direction I don't like. So maybe I should try to do something about the way it's going and stop it going there. What people like me are doing is just very simple. We're trying to give people choice. Now, if you are enslaved in five-sense reality to the point where you're not aware of anything beyond it, then you are not in a state of choice. There is no free will, and the manipulation of choice is one of the great foundations of control. We have this idea that we have freedom of choice. If I say in Phantom Self, if I offer you a choice of a cake or an apple, then you have a free choice to choose between them. But they're not the only choices. This is the point. So it's a free choice between two things, but it's not free choice in relation to other possible choices. And so what people like me are doing is saying to people, look, there are other ways of looking at the world. There's other ways of looking at why the world is as it is. There's other ways of seeing where this world is going and why. And therefore, you have more choices based on more knowledge of what there is to choose in terms of your perception of reality. What the system wants to do is dictate your perception of reality. And what people like me are trying to do is to change that, to widen that, so people can see actually the program is only one possibility. There are endless, infinite others.
Listen, I love what you do. I love you, and this isn't anti. And I think this is an interesting conversation because I really want to get into your head.
Just explaining what people like me are doing, because it's
absolutely
important to make the point that I'm not coming along, as I've been saying now for 26 years. I'm not come along saying, here I am, here's what I'm saying, you must believe it. What I'm saying is, here's another possibility. What do you think?
And it's absolutely, and I remember when I was younger, I did not like being born into this world the way it was, because it was just one system, that was it. You had no choice. I was born into no choice in some respects, and I've always felt like that. So I do honour your work. It's just I've got the chance to look for my own answers, and as well as you have in your journey, and I'm finding it. I'm finding a different possibility as well. Now, just recently, I know you're not a major fan of well, no, I'm not going to put those words there, but you enjoy some channeled material, not all of it. You've got, I would say. I got someone on from the Seth material just a few days ago. He was one of the New York boys that was with Jane Roberts at the ESP classes in where it was just outside New York where this took place. And I've always sort of respected the Seth material at a point. And what he said was very interesting. What Seth said was very interesting. He said that the truth filtered through you through your belief system. So basically what he's saying is that if you believe that the world is evil or whatever it may be, then that's going to filter your truth. As in, we make our own reality. We create our own reality. Do you think potentially that you could have created this truth because this is your belief?
The point is, it was never my belief. I was born into this world and I didn't like it very much. And I've always been questioning of authority, because my experience is that authority so often lies to you. Even before my awakening. But what I've done since is just follow information. And from information have come conclusions. And, we can go as deep as you like into it all. But, you can also see that the basis of what I'm saying about the way the world's manipulated and where it's going is demonstrably true, because it's going there by the hour. So, is it my reality, or is it a collective reality? See, well, in the end, hold on a second. Let me finish. In the end, we're all just one consciousness. In the end, this is all just a game anyway. Sometimes it's a game we don't like, and a game that's extremely unpleasant, and people suffer terrible experiences. In the end, however, we will be, and always have been, and can only be, an infinite state of awareness. This is just an experience. This is not something that I'm challenging. I'm not saying that, I'm the last person to say, this is all there is, and therefore it's all what's going on is so important. What's important is the nature of the experience. I mean, do people want to live in a world where we can express our true self, or do they want to live in a world where the true self is increasingly being deleted and disconnected, and the transhumanist agenda is to do it technologically?
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of phantom self being disconnected from infinite self, you've seen nothing yet. Once they get technology inside people and connect that technology to a technologically generated sub-reality that people like the spokesman for Frankenstein, Ray Kurzweil, is calling the cloud, who says we'll be doing our thinking by 2030. What kind of experience do people want? That's the question. If they want to be attached to the cloud, well, do nothing, because that's the way it will end up. All I'm saying is there are other experiences to have, not just unpleasant ones. And so, take it or leave it is what I say. I've always said that. Just information. Make of it what you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, and I appreciate that. But I'll just end it with this. It says another thing. According to the theory of belief, evidence comes first. Sorry, evidence comes secondary. Your belief comes first. As a filter, that is.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the case. I mean that's the case for everybody. And when you are doing anything you need to, if you can appreciate that we create our own reality, you need to be constantly aware and constantly on guard from that perspective. Because what the system is doing is downloading beliefs which then become experienced reality. And so, yes, you have to watch that all the time. Everybody does.
You know, someone like Eckhart Tolle, right? He would never come across this. He would never come across the angle you have. Someone like Wayne Dyer would not as well. They have come here to do their own things with their own teachings in their own way, just as you are as well. But there's all, it's all a different path in one sense with Eckhart and Wayne, but it all comes down to what you're saying as well, which is oneness and unconditional love. It still comes down to that core thing. I think it does. If I was to say...
Well, yes, mate. Of course it does, and of course that's what I've been banging out all these years. But you know, you can just see when I look at the way that I'm seen by, you know, the people that are, if you like, in some of the New Age stars. I'm dismissed with a wave of the hand by many of them. In fact, publicly condemned and dismissed by some of them, because they think that it's all about one thing and it's all about their thing. You see, I have this phrase, my dot is the only dot. And what you can do if you come from that perspective is you can think that you've got it with your dot, whatever it is, and therefore someone with other dots, they haven't got it. When from my perspective, to understand anything and to see a picture, you have to connect the dots. You have to see that they're all connected. It's no good this New Age mentality saying everything's connected and then not dismiss the fact that everything in this world is connected. And you know, I hear people say, "Oh, you shouldn't talk about what you're talking about. It's negative." Well, okay, so what's negative about a greater awareness of what's going on? We got into this situation by not knowing what was going on. Thus, what's negative about knowing more about what's going on? And I hear people talk about you must let go of fear, and then they say, "Oh, you mustn't talk about that. It's too frightening." You know, we are infinite awareness, and therefore we should have the state of being, the state of awareness. Certainly we all have the potential for it, to look at this for what it is and then decide what we're going to do in response to it. I've been uncovering this now for 26 years. I've had some very challenging experiences with people over the years when they've told me the horrors they've been through. I've been told the horrors that this network of families and this network of control and manipulation has done to people. But I'm not frightened of it. I'm not frightened of any of them. I'm not frightened of what's going on. It just is. Everything just is. And but if we're going to try to make a difference in the world, if we think it's not, you know, what's going on is not very nice, then we've got to look it in the eye and face it, not run away and meditate and think, well, you know, hopefully it won't be there when I wake up.
Do you know, I remember when I interviewed Marianne Williamson, and it was so true, it resonated so true what she said. You cannot ignore the suffering of others. That's not being spiritual at all. You know, and that's one thing it pains me when I watch the news with the refugee crisis and I'm eating food, and just to see how they're suffering, it just really gets me. And I'm thinking, well, what the fuck am I doing? I'm not doing enough. Yes, you are. Just I take a deep breath and think, well, you're doing the show. It is getting something out there. You are trying, yeah. But it's you cannot ignore the suffering of people. And I will say this as well. There was no way on God's earth that I was ever going to interview someone like Wayne Dyer. His people, the Hay House organization, just put the metal cladders down straight away with that. They would not allow anyone, unless they had a massive following, to interview him. It was all about the money. And someone like Eckhart Tolle, I remember interviewing his people, and they said, "Oh my God, you've touched conspiracy theories, you've done UFO stuff. I'm sorry, I don't think it fits in." I was like, shit the bed,
My dot is the only dot. That's the problem. What they talk about has validity, but it's a dot. We surely are seeking to see the picture, and that means you have to encompass things you'd rather not be happening. But running away. I mean, you're absolutely right. Running away and kidding yourself. It's all someone else's experience, and it's all in the greater scheme of things. And explaining it away like that, it's just a cop out for doing nothing. Spirituality is not about escaping from reality. It's about facing reality and having the courage to face reality. Indeed, true spiritual awakening doesn't need courage because it doesn't have fear, because courage is just overcoming fear. So I see so many contradictions in that whole arena. I mean, one guy had a go at me for challenging what vaccines are doing to people. He bought the whole vaccine scam while claiming to be some spiritually enlightened being. I mean, this is see, if you are only interested in your own dot, then you're not a threat to the system. The system will just let you get on. You're not bothered. Dot people are not a threat to the system. Connecting the dot people who see the picture, they are a threat to the system.
What about this stance, though, that, okay, so you can't go out and change the world, but you can change yourself, and by changing yourself, you change everyone around you, which has a ripple effect to everyone else. If you come from the point of view of that, in the sense as well, what about this as well, adding to that, that all answers lie within, that we are so powerful, we are this, I call it, you call it infinite consciousness, I call it my higher self, the oversoul. We're able to connect to this part of us, which has all the answers we've ever wanted. It's so powerful. It's the allness, it's the isness, it's everything. And that if we just came from that space with answers that we're looking for, we would realize that how powerful we are, and that we are this infinite being, and that, we things can be different. We don't have to come from the space we're coming from.
Yes, but this is a point. There are many. I can only talk about my experience and my observation, and people make of it what they will. My experience of so many of the people who talk about being spiritual and won't face things they don't want to face, they have convinced themselves they are enlightened beings, and they are working on themselves, and they are making themselves better people in accordance with what they say in their books and what they say on a stage. But the question is, are they? I'm not saying they are or they aren't, but it's a question worth asking. I mean, because by their actions you shall know them, not by their words. And when you are claiming to be enlightened and teaching others, you say, to be enlightened, then at the same time ignoring the great swathe of what's happening in the world and why it's happening, that don't strike me as terribly enlightened. You look at people like Gandhi. They were action people. Look at people like Martin Luther King. They were action people. They expressed their spirituality and many others too in action. It was an expression of spirituality. It wasn't a self proclamation of spirituality. It was an expression of spirituality. And that's what changes anything. I mean, it's like knowledge. People say knowledge is power. No, it's not. The use of knowledge is power. Knowledge unused may as well be ignorance. And so I think people are see, when you're trying to uncover and point out and yourself try to understand what's happening in the world and why the world is as it is, you have many kind of challenges on many levels, but those challenges are part of your expression of spirituality. If you only want to, symbolically sit cross-legged on a mountain and be above it all, that's a choice. But it's not the only choice. And when you look at it through experience, it's not the choice that makes the biggest difference to people's lives. It's expressing that awareness that comes from, if you like, sitting cross-legged on a mountain, in making energetic, therefore, what we call physical change for the better.
And okay, would you be surprised that if the knowledge that the truth that you've downloaded, this truth that's come to you, call it channeled, downloaded, whatever, it just came to you, right, from your greater awareness, your higher self, your oversoul. Would you be surprised that if the nature of reality is even greater than what's been shown to you, that actually it's greater than any book that's out there, the nature of where we go to and what this is all about? It's no one's actually written about how the greatness of this reality. It's only been touched upon from a very low level. It's like being in the house and trying to get to the airport. We're still on the sofa. We haven't even got to the gas station yet. That's how expansive this is.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've always worked on the, if you like, the philosophy that many people throughout history have articulated using slightly different words, be it Confucius, be it Socrates, and the basic theme is wisdom is knowing how little we know. If you ever, especially within the limitation of the body's focus of attention and within this distorted reality, if you ever think you know all there is to know or all you need to know, then you're kidding yourself. To keep your mind constantly open to other possibilities and all possibilities, you have to be aware that whatever you know or think you know is an infinitesimal fraction of what there is to know. And this is why I see people, even in the alternative media, in fact, great swathes of it, who dismiss other possibilities by reflex action in the same way that the mainstream does. It's almost, I used an analogy a long time ago of coming out of the womb with a backpack on and a tent on your back, and vast numbers of people pitch their tent after a few strides, and it's here and no further. Some people go a bit further, and the people who've got a bit further get ridiculed and dismissed by those who pitch their tent. People then keep moving beyond the second lot of people who've now pitched their tent further down the road, here and no further. And the people that go on beyond them are ridiculed, dismissed by those who pitch their tent at number 2 position. Then it goes on and on and on and on like this, and until you reach the people who refuse to carry a backpack at all because they don't want a tent, because they know that if they pitch the tent anywhere, especially within this reality and with this life cycle, then they are deluding themselves that they've reached a point of knowledge in terms of its where they need, as far as they need to go. We have this infinite awareness, and thus we have the potential to be more and more infinitely aware. And the more we do that, the more understanding and the greater perspective we have of the world and the reality we're experiencing. And so I will go on to the day I leave this reality, still walking, still knowing that whatever I know is a fraction of what there is to know. But unless you do that, you pitch your tent further back down the road, and from that perspective, you're never going to know so much of what there is to know that is possible to know within this reality. And it's that understanding which essentially, eventually, will get people to see this world and themselves from a different perspective. Phantom self sees itself in isolation from other phantom selves. Thus, it's the perfect environment for divide and rule, for conflict, for playing one off and one group of phantom selves with a group title, a label off against others. The way to stop doing that is to reach that point where we are aware that we are all each other. But it's okay, having books published by Hay House, doing it in theory. But how about doing it practically in a world that desperately, desperately needs a reevaluation of its perception? If we are going to stop the direction the world is going in and going faster all the time.
Yes, and that's not with any judgment. That is, you're just saying that from the perspective of your truth, which is absolutely fine as well. Exactly. Absolutely fine.
People must make their choices. It's ever so simple. Life is ever so simple. Choice and consequence. Choice and consequence. Choice and consequence. That's all it is, and in its basic form. And you make choices based on information available, and whether it comes from experience or comes from other sources. And so you make better choices when you have more information and more, therefore, perspective and context within which you're making that choice. And so people must make the choice. I'm not telling people they must make different choices. I'm talking about choice and consequence, choice and consequence. And from my perspective, is that if we go on making the choices that we have been making up to this point, then the world is going to be a deeply unpleasant place in the not too distant future. For many already, for vast numbers already, it already is. But I'm talking a point where even the ability to free think will be denied by technology and other things. So, people must look at my information if they choose to, and then make a choice on what they do based on that information and what they make of it. It's just simple. Choice and consequence, choice and consequence. And then eventually we leave this reality, go on making choices and taking consequences for all eternity.
Well, it does seem to be that from the people that I've interviewed as well, and I've got my own connection now as well, I can go within and ask, but it does seem to be that what you don't sort out down here, you sort out when you get back home, or heaven, or whatever you want to personify it as. So I'm all one for sorting issues out here if you can do, and that's not always easy when you've got other people involved, because they've on their own path as well, but you've got to do your best, I suppose. And also, do you think that we should see the good in people, or the God in people in a sense, and the good within ourselves? When we see the good within ourselves, we can see the good within bad people as well, maybe.
Well, first of all, there's a reason why, as someone once said, death is no cure for ignorance, or whatever. It's because our state of being, when we withdraw from this reality, carries an energetic frequency signature based on the state of being we have been in up to that point. Thus, you take that with you. You take that frequency, that state of being with you. So it's true that, you know, there are choice and consequences. Don't just end with what we call death. Yes, of course, you try to see the good in people. And as I've been saying in my books way back, you know, and I can say this with absolute honesty, I look at the people that are running this world, and I've met many, many people who've interacted with those people and have suffered indescribably, almost unimaginably from those people. But I don't have any hatred for them, because if I want to expose what they're doing so it can be stopped, but I don't have any hatred for them, because if I have hatred for them, I become them. And what's the point in that? You know, you can uncover deeply unpleasant things without being frightened of them. You can uncover deeply unpleasant things without being pulled into their frequency. And you can uncover deeply unpleasant people without hatred. Because the only person that suffers from hating someone else is the hater. But there's a difference there's a balance between hating these people, and I see a lot of that, of course, in the alternative media, and also at the other extreme, seeing good in to the point where you don't see what they're doing. And you say, oh, no one will ever do that. No, they'd never do that. They'd never do that. No one would do that. No, you wouldn't do that. They would do that. And we need to face the fact they're doing it, or it's going to go on. You know, it's okay, people saying, oh, you mustn't say this and you mustn't do that, you mustn't do that. What about the people who are suffering? What about the kids who are suffering? What about the people all over the world that are suffering daily because of the actions of this network? What about the people in Libya who were bombed from the sky mercilessly on the pretext of protecting them from violence? Let's forget about them, because I'm just gonna meditate. Well, meditate, get some insight, and then let's see how you're going to express that in the world, so that we don't have people being bombed from the sky. I mean, you know, it's again, it's choice and consequence with whether you ignore what's going on or whether you try to make a difference to it. It's choice and consequence. There's always consequences in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one way that I thought that, you know, that I've been thinking, I've thought it for a long time, actually. I gave up with it, actually, and when I started to channel, it came back to me to tell me that's what I'm here to do. But, you know, still it just seems like such a daunting thing. But, you know, what was the only way I could see it for my key skills to make a difference was some sort of spiritual news network, you know, approaching the news from a completely alternative perspective, a 24/7 spiritual news channel where it's approaching, you know, getting the big people on that you wouldn't normally get on because you're a news network, but approaching it from a totally different stance, the interview with them, yeah. And you know, because they soon hold up their Bible, don't they? You know, and you know, but they don't live by it.
Well, you know, it's very important what you're doing and what people like you are doing, because in the end, and we come back to the same thing: choice and consequence. The best choices are made from the best range of information from which to make that choice. And of course, what the mainstream media is doing is, as an expression of the program, it's giving people, well, it's not even giving people narrow choices, it's telling people what their choices should be. That's even more extreme. And so the antidote to that is alternative information to show that there are other choices that can be made and there are other perspectives of the same situation.
But a news network, not a network. See, I always thought it would be a network that had other people's shows like this on there. I don't think that's the right perspective to do it from anymore. That's just my truth. I think it's got to come from the news. You know, imagine when the Paris shootings happened, approaching that not just from an alternative approach like Alex Jones would do, but from that spiritual perspective. Imagine that. It'd be so different. be so different, and that's the perspective that we don't get. But yeah, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Alex Jones. I'm just saying that I just think that there's another perspective in all this as well.
So what perspective would you have put on the Paris events from this news network point of view then, Kev?
From a spiritual perspective, I would have done well. I don't know exactly, but just imagine that you've got someone there that's some sort of spiritual guru, and not guru, but someone that's time served in that arena, spirituality, and that looks at it from the sense that, well, there may have been a bigger picture why this has happened. There may have been choices involved here. Souls choose to do things. I don't really thought it out completely, but it would be from something that brings people back to who they are. That. I don't know. I haven't got all the answers, have I? But it would be a spiritual perspective. I don't even know what that means really, but it would be from something like that. And people will watch this and think, well, he's not got a fucking clue what he's talking about, really, has he? But that's the intuitive feeling of it, a spiritual perspective. But what the bigger picture of that is, I don't know.
Well, I think whatever you bring up, whatever we're talking about, it comes back to the same thing. Expansion of awareness out of the program. Expansion of awareness out of the program doesn't just give you a greater fix on how the world's manipulated. It gives you a greater fix on you. It gives you a greater fix on reality in general. It gives you a greater fix on the great infinite forever. It gives you a fix on everything. It's not just about waking up to how the world's manipulated. That's only part of it, and so so much for me. This is just my view of the alternative media has not awakened to expansions of consciousness. It has worked it out intellectually, which you can do if you ignore all the spiritual, for want of a word. I don't like the word myself. I don't know why I don't like it, but I don't. I think it has connotations, that's why. But if you ignore all that side of it and you just focus on the world, you can, if you stay in the 5 sense level of the manipulation, the names, days, places, connections, secret societies, you can work it out, at least to some extent, intellectually. If you have that perspective. But if you only work it out intellectually, you only stay within that perspective. Thus, your only solution is from within this reality. So it's stockpiling weapons and stockpiling food, and it's fighting the enemy. And that's what much of the alternative media is, I think. It's far from all of it, but much of it. And I'm not knocking that either, because that level is necessary to let people see that there are other ways of explaining world events, even at that level. But if you don't expand your awareness to the point where you go beyond religion, you go beyond buying mainstream science just because it's mainstream science without question, then you don't go into those realms where you can look at this world from a different point of view and realize that getting pulled into hatred of what you perceive to be the enemy is actually going to take the world nowhere, which is why these so-called people's revolutions, often through history, that have been brought about by hatred for what they wish to overthrow, have simply produced something similar under a different name eventually afterwards, or controlled but more covertly. And it is a spiritual revolution that we need, not a physical revolution, because the physical revolution will express the spiritual revolution. And by spiritual revolution, I mean a revolution of our sense of identity, so that we come from this perspective of being infinite awareness, having an experience, instead of self-identifying with the experience. And that alone will expand the range of infinite awareness that you're accessing, thus the insight, the intuitive knowing that will come from that. So, when people say to me, what can I do? Well, there are practical things you can do. I mean, people say there's nothing I can do, and there's phone-in radio shows all over the dial every day. I mean, you can. There's nothing you can't do. But in the end, when people say, "What can I do?" the answer is only you know. But so when you access that level of yourself beyond the program, then you can get the insight of your particular contribution. Okay, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do to make a difference in the way that I want to make a difference? And what then happens once you tap into that and you're willing to go with it, then the synchronicity starts to happen where you end up clearly being taken along a certain path, which is leading in a certain direction for your particular contribution. It's no good saying once you say to people, yeah, but what can I do? Tell me what to do. Because what you're doing is externalizing your power then to me or someone else. So instead of a politician or somebody else, some priest, you're externalizing it to me. What people must do is, again, you mentioned it earlier, work on themselves instead in terms of deprogramming themselves from the download of perception, and then follow where it guides them. Let their intuition be their guide, not what people tell them their life should be and their role should be. Only they know, and only they can make that choice anyway.
And they can manifest this as well by just actually going into a quiet space in their head and seeing themselves in the not too distant future of that particular role that they've taken on. So if it's to manifest whatever it may be, they want a radio show, whatever it may be, that they want to become an alternative journalist or whatever it is, right? You just imagine yourself in that role and that you've got it and that you're happy, and then you keep doing that until you've sort of brought it to yourself, because this is a reality where it's I believe that you can draw things to you. You can manifest the life that you want.
Yeah, you can draw things to you. That's what we're doing. Once you get into a certain state of the program, that perception manifests itself in you as a frequency, and that frequency will draw to it like frequencies. It's what I called years ago vibrational magnetism, for want of a term. And thus, every person, every location, every experience is a frequency field. It's an information field which you can draw to you or you can push away. And this is how we create our reality. And the force that is behind all this manipulation, well beyond the people we see in dark suits, they know that. They know that if they can program someone's perception, that perception will, by its very nature, draw to that person things that relate to that perception, and it works for everybody. And that's we have to be aware of this. But from my personal point of view, I've never meditated and focused. I mean, people have said to me I met many people. I totally respect it works for them. But personally, I've never meditated, and I've never, I sit quietly all the time and go into ponder daydream mode. It's a form of meditation. That happens all the time. But I've never meditated and visualized what I want to happen. I've just followed the clues and followed the dots, and synchronicity is manifested. Because a lot of it happens on a subconscious level anyway. The conscious mind is a fraction of what is actually working. I mean, symbolically, the conscious mind is the dark, and the subconscious mind is not just webbed feet. It's like gigantic, enormous, beyond description sized webbed feet. And that's where most of it's going on.
Well, it just goes to show that we are limitless when we come out of the five senses and realize what our true nature is and where we came from and where we go back to as well. And yes, you're right. You can have the life that you want. I completely believe that, and it can be of purpose. And I think it was Edgar Casey that said that when we're one of the most important things on this planet is to be of service.
Yeah, this is the point, though. But be of service to yourself as well. Never forget yourself, because if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after anything else. And sometimes we forget that. What would it be? About a year ago now, I became very ill. I became burned out. What is called adrenal burnout. I'd just been overworking for so long that the body said, "Hold on a minute, you're having a rest here." And what I did is kind of reevaluate things, and now I look after myself a lot more. And it's important, there is this perception in some areas of spirituality that somehow giving of yourself to the point where you basically forget about yourself and it's all service externalized, that's called spirituality. It isn't. Spirituality for me is a sense of balance, and we have to look after ourselves and be kind to ourselves as well as seek to be kind and be of service to others.
And just one of your important... Absolutely, and one of your important messages as well was, I think, from the beginning of this interview, is follow your intuition. It'll never let you down. It never let you down either.
Well, this is the point, which kind of brings us round to where we started. The program all happens in the head, basically, and intuition comes from the heart. These are just points on the body. It's an illusion in that sense, but they are different perspectives, just as one side of the brain is a different perspective to the other. Basically, the program is all going on overwhelmingly, though certainly not all, in the left side of the brain, or at least in the areas that the left side of the brain is said to process and manifest. The education system, it's almost all left brain. And if you look, even when I was a kid, I'm coming up 64. When I was a kid in the 50s, there was a lot more right brain stuff then, a lot more art and a lot more things that express creativity. But what it's become more and more is just a trudge of remembering facts and left brain information and left brain perspectives, and therefore intuition starts to be silenced when you get so much in the head that the head is governing all reaction, perceptions, and responses. And I quote somewhere, I think in Perception, in Phantom Self, a study at the one of the universities in America where they studied children at school right the way through the school period, from when they first entered to when they left. And what they found was things like that: unique thinking, free thinking, creative thinking, thinking outside the box, all diminished the longer the kids were at school. It's what the program is. And so one of the great ways out of the program is simply to bypass it and get out of the head and into the heart. Okay, what do you think about this? All right, but what do you feel about it? What do you feel about it? And there's an interesting, I think I mentioned this in Phantom Self, at the Heart Map Institute in America, where they study the power of the heart energetically in so many other ways. One of the people that runs that was saying that when she was a therapist, she used to have this technique where she'd put a person in a chair and she'd get them to talk to them from the head, and then she'd put them in another chair and get them to talk from the heart. And she said it was like talking to two completely different people. And that is so indicative of the difference between the head perspective, the program, I would suggest, and the heart perspective beyond the program. The heart perspective is what's going to transform the world, and because the head perspective has got us into where we are.
Very true, very true. Now, thank you for sharing that, by the way. We've been putting your books up all the way along this interview, and links to get the tickets for the world events, for the world tour. Would you prefer that people get the book directly from yourself right now? Because you're shipping all across America separately now, I believe. You've got some sort of deal over there, have you?
Yeah. What happens is that if people come to the website, which is where it all comes from, what we're doing, I think we're going to launch this next week. What's had to happen, because up to this point, Kev, as you well know from what the work you've done, it's been done with a tiny few people, and what's achieved by a tiny few people is just extraordinary, really. And so what we've been doing is, someone in Australia wants a book, we've had to send it out from London. Someone in America wants it sending out from London. Of course, you have the time lapse till they get it. You have the shipping costs, which are considerable. What we're doing now is we've got this agreement where they're going to be shipped out from within those countries. So they'll get them very quickly, and they'll get them for a fraction of the shipping cost as it was before. And it's all just trying to make it easier for people to have access to the information, because even today, the mainstream media dominates the information that most people receive, and of course that's controlled by corporations with vast amounts of money. And we're, you, me, all of us are trying to challenge that from a very different perspective. And all you can do is your best. But things are improving. There's no doubt about it. Although, of course, the giants of the internet, Google and Facebook and YouTube and stuff, are showing very clear signs, Twitter too, more, that censorship is the future, because what we're doing is having too much of an impact in terms of alerting people to the fact that the world can be seen from another perspective.
Absolutely, and obviously using Amazon as well to ship your books on. They take care. I don't know how businesses survive nowadays, because the Amazon and eBay have become the main dominating platforms. Yet they've got it so worked up that they take all the profits away from you, and you're left with bugger all. Well, so clever. This is
the point. You see, the whole conspiracy is to centralize power, because diversity is always the garlic and cross to uniformity and control. And central control needs uniformity. Its nightmare is diversity. And so what we're seeing, it's interesting in this country. When I was a kid, basically you went to the local shop. There were no supermarkets, because I'm old, there were no supermarkets when I was a kid. I saw the first supermarkets being built. And then the supermarkets came along, and they swallowed up the shops. Now we're seeing the Amazons swallowing up the supermarkets. We're now having Amazon in Britain delivering food. And they started off with books, and Amazon's a monster. The idea is that a few corporations control everything, and there is no small business, there is no medium business, there is even no big business in the end, just giant corporations. And it's interesting with this EU referendum that it's medium and small sized businesses and representatives of them who are saying, actually, we'd be okay if we came out because the red tape is killing us. And it's the giant corporations and representatives of them that are saying we must stay in the EU. And the reason for the emergence of this monster Amazon and other monsters like Google, and at the same time, medium and small businesses being deluged with red tape and regulation, is because that's all designed to destroy them. Because the idea is that they're not going to be here. That's where it's going. And again, it's about perspective, and it's about the range of information. if small and medium-sized business knew the game and knew the agenda for them, they would respond to events in a very different way to the way that many of them do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it? I find your work absolutely fascinating, and I'm so glad to have had this conversation with you. I hope this helps a lot of people, this interview. For me,
yes,
it's really...
Great, mate. I mean, it's lovely to talk about these things, because you don't always get a chance to.
Well, no, yeah, but absolutely, thank you. But for me, for yourself, it's really expanded. Again, you come from a completely different standpoint compared to some, but it's so bloody interesting to hear your viewpoint and your truth, and to hear an opposing truth as well compared to what's always out there. Because again, it just really makes you think, and you've made me think again, and it's been a very, very fascinating interview with yourself. It really has. Yeah. Well, David Icke, I'd just like to say thank you so much for joining us today, and I wish you all the best for your world tour. And please, anyone that gets a chance to go see David, please do, because it's a fascinating day, basically, at an amazing conference it will be. So please, when you get a chance to get a ticket, please do. Thank you, David.
Cheers, Kevin. Talk to you again. Bye.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.